So President Trump calls out the former Obama intelligence team, and it gets pretty ugly. The president calls former CIA Director John Brennan and former head of National Intelligence Jim Clapper political hacks. He believes that many in the agencies have become politicized and that they're using the Russia investigation to achieve political goals. The two were offended. They went on TV to defend themselves.
He was referring to us as political hacks because he was trying to delegitimize the intelligence community assessment that was done. Secondly, I feel very honored to be associated with Jim Clapper and Jim Comey in the same category. And considering the source of the criticism, I consider that criticism a badge of honor.
Brennan and Clapper then went on to say that the president is, quote, being played by Vladimir Putin and President Xi. So is it wise or is it wrong for these former U.S. military and CIA officials to criticize the sitting president while he's overseas and in discussions at that moment with foreign leaders? They believe it is, quote, a badge of honor. So is it? Tony Shaffer and Ambassador John Bolton join us with their take on this in moments. But we begin with Trace Gallagher, live in our West Coast newsroom tonight. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. It wasn't just the former spy chiefs under President Obama, James Clapper and John Brennan, who criticized President Trump's statements on Vladimir Putin. GOP Senator John McCain also expressed concerns that the president accepted Putin's word over the consensus by U.S. intelligence community that Russia meddled in the election. But what Mr. Trump said aboard Air Force One is this, quoting, "Every time he sees me," meaning Vladimir Putin, he says, "I didn't do that." And I really believe that when he tells me that, he means it. But the audio wasn't released, and our chief White House correspondent John Roberts, who heard the interview, says the president's voice inflection is very important because it's clear the president is not saying he believes Putin. He's saying he believes Putin means it when he says he didn't do it. The president later clarified his remarks by issuing his clearest comment yet that he agrees with U.S. intelligence. Watch.
I believe that he feels that he and Russia did not meddle in the election. As to whether I believe it or not, I'm with our agencies, especially as currently constituted with their leadership. I believe in our intel agencies, our intelligence agencies.
The president went on to say it's important to get along with Russia and China, especially as it relates to North Korea. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper calls the president naive. Watch.
I think it's very naive and again, in fact, perilous to this country to make an assumption that Russia is going to behave with the best interests of the world or certainly the United States in mind. They're not.
Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin responded by saying the president is not getting played. He is simply trying to get Russia on board with our strategy. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. Joining me now, retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer is a CIA-trained intel operative. John Bolton is former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and a Fox News contributor. Gentlemen, welcome. You know, this struck me when I watched this play out yesterday. I mean, everyone, of course, is entitled to their opinion. But to watch this unfold while the president was in the middle of these, diplomatic discussions overseas was interesting, to say the least. Tony?
Well, Martha, you're completely correct. I mean, these guys are behaving like apparatchiks trying to undermine the government to create the Soviet Union. It's evil. Look, Jim Clapper is the last guy to be talking about someone being fooled. I briefed that man into an operation that only 10 people knew about, and at the end of the briefing, he looked at me like he had no idea what room he was in. This is completely insane. These people are being not only disloyal, they're being destructive. They're actually involved, as far as I can tell, in a campaign to disrupt everything. Clapper, Comey, Brennan all testified there was no hack. What President Trump said to clarify the issue regarding Putin was that, yes, there were 3 agencies and 1 DNI who said that it was hacked. He's got his current guys in there right now. Martha, I've talked to the current folks. They are very much aware of the Russian threat. But to the president's point, we cannot go around trying to poke people in the eye for what happened last year when we are now aware and we need to hold them accountable, but we have other things we got to do. Remember, President Obama himself admitted that he ignored this threat, and these 2 guys allowed him to do that.
John Bolton, what do you think?
Well, I think it's the end of a long trend for the country that's been very destructive to see the heads of our intelligence agencies in the news so much. I really think the entire intelligence community's got to close the door behind them and go back into the shadows. I think it's wrong in this sense to have supposedly career officials out in public like this. I think as many people in the military have said, just because you become a civilian when you retire from the military, it impairs the civil-military relationship to become a public figure. I think much the same applies to the intelligence agencies, especially when you're dealing with military figures. So I think this incident is regrettable, but I'm afraid it comes at the end of a long series of episodes of people doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at the period under which these two gentlemen ran their organizations, and Tony, in your opinion, how was their record in terms of handling, in other countries, leadership, having a good understanding of what the dynamics were?
Well, that was the issue. As I mentioned, President Obama himself acknowledged that he ignored this threat. These men, in turn, did not do their job to say, Mr. President, you really need to take this seriously. Look, John Brennan, as far as I'm concerned, should have been at least twice brought up on charges for one thing. He leaked to reporters when he was still working at the White House for President Obama, leaked information to the press that resulted in MI6 losing a critical human net in Yemen. This is no small thing, and as my information is, he's done other things before he left office to leak to the media, to the New York Times in particular. So he has no record to stand on, and as John's point is, I believe that these men have become political pawns in a larger game. They don't want to walk away. They miss having the authority they did, but during the time they had the authority, Martha, they abused it badly, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, Ambassador, what about the notion from James Clapper that the president's being played by Vladimir Putin and President Xi? Do you think there's anything to that?
I don't think so, and I think next perhaps General Clapper will become a shrink. I mean, listen, these opinions are not based on contact with the president. They're based on their reading of the political atmosphere, and I think it's reflective of the sad and very unfortunate politicization of the intelligence community under the Obama administration, and not necessarily gross things like distorting specific facts or adding in facts. It's the ideology that they carried out. Remember, General Clapper once said the Muslim Brotherhood was a, quote, a largely secular organization. That was the Obama administration ideology, that radical Islam doesn't exist. That's not based on intelligence. That's based on ideology. And they were guilty of it, and they're just continuing it in these public statements.
What about the interaction between Vladimir Putin and the president, Tony, in terms of him saying that, right, he believes that Vladimir Putin believes that they weren't involved?
Well, Putin is good. Look, the Russians set up tripwires, Martha, for both political parties last year. They meddled. Nobody's denying that. The issue is, obviously, we've got to hold the Russians to a certain level of, Russians are going to do what the Russians are going to do. They've done this always. Back to the Cold War. So the president is, I think, responding correctly. We've got to deal with them in Syria. We've got to deal with them in North Korea. We've got to convince them that there's some areas that we have to cooperate on. At the same time, understand that they are up to no good. They will do whatever they can to undermine what we're doing. It's just the way they operate. We have to have the relationship with our eyes open, but with some level of idea of what we want to do with that relationship.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Good to see you both tonight.
Thank you.
So coming up next, it looks like the tables have turned.
Because the Dems are back. I will destroy all of this.
Did you catch this? We're going to show it to you in a moment. The Democrats, now the ones getting roasted on Saturday Night Live as old and out of touch. Ouch. Will the party's leadership finally take a look at this and maybe decide that they need to make some changes? Who should be the new face of the Democratic Party? Charles Hurt and Zach Pecanis. Join me coming up next. Plus, the pressure is building on Capitol Hill at this hour. Republicans have their work cut out for them on the tax reform bill, over which there is a tremendous amount of haggling and some dikes that are spurting some water in different places. So we're going to show you what's going on. Brand new opposition, not from the Democrats, but from Republicans on this, and it does threaten the future of tax reform. Also, despite the empty stands, near empty, I mean, they were looking pretty lean last night in some places, the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell says there's not going to be any changes to stop players from protesting the national anthem. It's not the only comment that he has said that made fans furious. He wants, according to the reports, $50 million a year. Governor Mike Huckabee is fired up about that, and he joins me in a little bit. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more story.
Yeah, that flag gets disgraced in this country, I'll be the first ones there. I'll fight for that flag.
I hope I contribute to the healing of our party. I want us to run campaigns in all 50 states. And if my book allow us to run campaigns in all 50 states, great. If my book allow us to invest in candidates in down ballot races in Kansas and Georgia, Montana, great.
Donna Brazile wants to heal the Democratic Party, so will she be part of the future? That could include Joe Biden. Even SNL is calling out the Democrat Party for being short on new faces, and even perhaps worse, questions now as to whether the Clinton campaign broke campaign finance law in their dealings with the DNC. A lot of news on this front tonight. Fox News chief correspondent, national correspondent Ed Henry joins me now from the White House with the backstory on that tonight. Hi, Ed.
Martha, good to see you. It was nothing short of a political earthquake when President Trump shocked the world by riding to victory on that vow to drain the swamp. The tremors still being felt in both political parties, with establishment Republicans like Bob Corker and Jeff Flake heading for the exits, others feuding with Steve Bannon. But the real tremors are being felt on the Democratic side of the aisle, where Hillary Clinton has simply refused to leave the stage 1 year later, making it difficult for her party to rebuild with a new generation of leaders. And while you heard Donna Brazile there tell MSNBC she wants to help lead the healing of her party, her new book has torn some liberals apart, with the revelations about the Democratic National Committee appearing to collude with the Clinton camp, and some conservative lawyers pushing for the Justice Department to investigate whether the effort to tilt the Democratic nomination away from Senator Bernie Sanders was more than just unethical. Republican attorneys Cleta Mitchell and Nas Van Spakowski today writing in the Wall Street Journal that the law does not, quote, allow a single candidate to control a political party's operations and expenditures. And the memo signed by the Clinton camp allowed them full access to all research work and tools paid for by the DNC, quote, despite Federal Election Commission regulations that prohibit private sharing such research with the candidate without either reporting the cost as an in-kind contribution or having other disclosures. Then there's the fact that even the notoriously liberal Saturday Night Live on MSNBC this weekend took aim at the advancing age of the Democratic leaders, and as if on cue this morning, former Vice President Joe Biden, turning 75 next week, went on NBC's Today Show to say he may be running yet again.
You love our fresh new ideas delivered by fresh new faces like me, Nancy Pelosi.
And me, Dianne Feinstein.
And me, Chuck Schumer.
And we also have some great new leaders waiting in the wings, like hot young thing Elizabeth Warren. And also, that's right,
it's Biden time.
Oh, no, I'm not closing the door. Look, I've been around too long. I mean, I'm a great respecter of fate. But who knows what the situation is going to be a year and a half from now.
Now, in January 2021, Joe Biden would be 78, Hillary Clinton would be 73, and to be fair, President Trump would be 74. Martha?
78's the new 50, though. Keep that in mind, Ed. Thank you very much. So here with more, Charlie Hurt joins us now, political columnist at the Washington Times and a Fox News contributor, and Zach Buchanan, a former senior DNC advisor who worked also on the Hillary Clinton campaign. Welcome, guys. Good to see both of you. I want to get to sort of the news side of it, and then I want to talk about the cultural effect of the SNL sketch and Joe Biden. But, Zach, let me start with you with this Wall Street Journal story, which basically says that Hillary Clinton's group basically monopolized the funds of the DNC and didn't sort of adhere to the idea that everybody puts their money in and then it becomes sort of a common pot of money, and that could mean that she could face some concerns that they broke federal election law.
I mean, the only thing that the Wall Street Journal piece proved is that the Wall Street Journal has no idea about campaign finance law. If the Hillary Clinton campaign broke the law, then Donald Trump broke the law. Then Roy Moore, when he signed an agreement with the NRSC, they broke the law as well, in addition to being a pedophile. So I think that's the only thing that I would be worried about, the stupidity coming from the Wall Street Journal.
Charlie?
I don't know how dumb you think people are, Zachary, but the point of the campaign finance laws is to govern how much control candidates have over the finances that come into their campaigns. The idea, the fact that the Democratic National Committee chairman herself said that she couldn't write a press release under the DNC name without permission from the Hillary Clinton campaign means that Hillary Clinton was controlling not only her own campaign, but all of the money, the big money that was coming into the DNC.
All right, you know what, you guys are going to agree to disagree on this one.
But
it
wasn't illegal.
Hang on one second. I do want to just bring you some breaking news. Go ahead, Charlie. Finish your thought, and then I want to show you the breaking news.
But what does it say about Democrats that they're having a hard time beating a pedophile in Alabama?
I mean, there are 3 polls that just came out that said we're ahead. So what does it say about a party who nominates and sticks by a pedophile?
Great. That's great.
All right. We know the charges. And we know what's going on there. We're going to talk about Roy Moore in just a moment. But I do want to bring you this because we just got this information a few moments ago. Jeff Sessions has now opened the door to the possibility of a special counsel on the Uranium One story and on the Hillary Clinton scandal with regard to the Clinton Foundation and the emails and all of what surrounds that. Concerned about that, Zach?
I mean, look, I mean, what this shows is that we have yet again another attempt by this administration to undermine the Russia investigation and throw up smoke to try to distract people from what's actually going on as indictments are coming down, as people are going to jail, as we expect more indictments to come down as well. This so-called scandal has been debunked so many times from fact checkers. I mean, time after time after time.
Charlie, you want to respond to that?
Donna Brazile can kind of try to go cut back some of her comments, talking about how the Hillary Clinton campaign rigged the election, the DNC rigged the election last year. But the fact remains that if you listen to the things that she said and the accusations she leveled, it's clear that the system was rigged. And Donald Trump became president and did the statesmanlike thing and decided, you know what, I'm not going to try to prosecute these things. I'm not going to prosecute my old enemies. But I think it's becoming very clear that that so much of the crimes and bad things that the Clintons did, Hillary Clinton did, the Clinton campaign did, that maybe he was being too generous, and maybe these things are serious enough that we should start.
Well, they're going to give it another hearing and another look. Jeff Sessions is going to testify before Congress tomorrow morning. So no doubt a lot of this is going to come up, and they released this evening that they are open to the idea of another special counsel. With regard to Saturday Night Live, I mean, this is pretty interesting in terms of the way they went after all of those individuals and even Hillary Clinton. Look at this one from the end of that bit. Let's play the Hillary Clinton part.
We won't stop now because we need another path for our country.
Another vision for America. Another chance for me, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Just one more chance. And maybe one more chance after that.
Oh, she left. One more chance, Zach. And Joe Biden in the wings, according to the interviews that he did this morning. He's thinking about it.
Here are things I know. I know Hillary Clinton is not going to run again, and I know that we have an incredibly dynamic party with a very deep bench of people of all different ages and experiences, from Kamala Harris to Cory Booker to Jason Kander to Elizabeth Warren and others who are not old. They just have years of wisdom gained.
Charlie, significant that SNL is going after the Democrats now?
Well, I think it's an obvious target, and it's a very easy target. I mean, Joe Biden has been with us and he has been in Washington for 44 years. Yeah, and Bernie Sanders is a spring chicken, but he's also a communist.
We'll leave it there. Love. Thanks, you guys. Good to see you. So those are the options. Coming up tonight, we have this as well. At least 5 big-name senators in just the last hour calling for Roy Moore to step down in the Alabama Senate race as a new person has come forward to accuse him of inappropriate behavior decades ago. Judge Napolitano weighs in on this huge controversy and the pushback from some in the party as well. Also tonight, the final details on tax reform being hammered out on Capitol Hill to get the plan up for a vote by the end of this week. Everybody wants a tax cut, right? Nobody's going to say no to that. Republicans promised it. So can they deliver? Congressman Pete King wants to make sure that they do what they promised they would do. Coming up next.
The Republican leadership is asking their members to walk the plank.
Also breaking tonight, critical week, as you know, for tax cuts. The Senate Finance Committee begins their markup today of the tax cuts bill, which as it stands right now has some very stark differences from the House version. It also appears to have a better chance of passage overall. At least that's the latest take on it. They're going to bring the vote in the House on Thursday. However, a key sticking point is, are you going to get to deduct your state and local taxes? That's one of the big issues in some of the most populous states in the country. Here with some answers, New York Republican Congressman Peter King. Congressman, welcome. Good to have you here tonight.
Thank you, Martha.
I want to start with this. I understand that you wrote a letter to try to open negotiations on this. Did you get any response to that?
No, we haven't gotten any response. But tonight, there is a meeting at the Whip Steve Scalise has called for 9 o'clock in his office. He's invited the New York delegation, so I will be there to see if they're going to have any negotiation or if they're just going to explain the bill the way it currently is. But as it currently is, I cannot vote for it because of what it does. It takes away most of the property tax deduction and all of the state income tax deduction. And that would be devastating to people in my district, middle and upper middle income people who are, by the way, the backbone of Trump supporters. Because I have a Democratic district.
Yeah, so
and I voted twice for Obama, but 9 points for Donald Trump this time, a 14-point
So do you think,
turnaround.
I mean, if they hadn't responded to you, say now that you've heard from Steve Scalise, but do you get the feeling that they don't really care about your district at this point, that they think it's blue and they're not going to worry about those areas of the country? New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, California?
If there is a political decision made, it was certainly to benefit the red states at the expense of the blue. Now, Steve Scalise is a great guy, so he does care, but I don't see how they can get me to vote no because, again, up till now, we've spoken to them maybe several times, and there's been no counteroffer at all. There's nothing on the table right now. And it would really, it would actually result, I believe strongly, in a tax increase for many people in my district. And these are not high-end people.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, Congressman King. Give me an example of somebody who's considered, upper middle class in your district.
Yeah, and I know this sounds like a lot to the rest of the country, but if you're a police officer, a school teacher, firefighter, construction worker, you could be a husband and wife working together, especially if one of them has a second job. They could have an income over $300,000. But our property taxes and state income taxes would come to at least between $25,000 and $30,000. The cost of living is much higher. And for them to lose that deduction, in addition to that, lose other deductions such as the personal exemption, which would come to $18,000 for a family of four, that ends up definitely being a tax increase for them. And that's wrong. And these, again, are not wealthy people. They're hardworking people in a very high-cost part of the country. And again, if they want to do this, they should start indexing maybe. I mean, some states you can buy a mansion for $100,000. In my district, you'd need $500,000 just to get started.
Congressman King, thank you. Always good to see you. Thanks for coming in tonight. So let's speak now with Mark Lotter, former Special Assistant to President Trump and Press Secretary to Vice President Pence, who joins us now. Mark, so this is the problem with this bill, because you have people like the couple that was just described by Congressman King, who certainly do not consider themselves wealthy and in fact would probably have to cut back dramatically on buying a new car or building another house or expanding. Their spending would have to be cut back under this plan. How is that good?
Well, one of the things that the plan does is it doubles the standard deduction, or nearly doubles it to $24,000 from the current level. So that helps offset some of those losses. And let's remember, too, that for the vast majority, about 80% of the people who benefit from the SALT deductions or the state and local income tax deductions are making six figures. Now, that might impact some folks there in some high tax states and some high cost states.
Yeah, but
on the other side, you also have to turn around and look to a state where I'm from, which is Indiana, that's very low cost, low taxes. What you're actually now doing is you would be impacting the ability to cut their taxes, because we're offsetting the tax and the high taxes of other state and local governments that are not as fiscally
I get it, but what you're telling those Republicans in all of those blue states is that they're not going to get a tax cut. They're considered rich when they know, they do their own checkbook every night. They never imagined that they would have a House, Senate, and President all Republican, and that their taxes were going to go higher in that scenario.
Well, what you're looking at right now, though, is part of the legislative process. The House has a $10,000 deduction for property taxes in their proposal. The Senate doesn't. At the end of the day, the House will vote on their bill today or this week. The Senate will come back next week after Thanksgiving and vote on theirs. And then the two sides will hash out the final details on an agreement that can pass both chambers. But that's one of the areas that they're going to have to definitely address. The House does make an attempt at doing it. The Senate does not. And I have faith they'll get there at the end.
You know, I think a lot of those people wonder why staying at 1.5 trillion has to kind of be on their backs, and why they can't have spending cuts, why the government can't find any other way than to take the money out of their pockets. Why not take it out of some of the bureaucracy in Washington and drain the swamp and save some money that way?
Well, these are two separate processes. So under the Senate rules, you're capped at $1.5 trillion over the 10 years for the taxes. You can deal with the other stuff on the budget side in a separate bill, and you know that the Republicans will do that. The president introduced a budget blueprint that was definitely shrinking the size of government earlier this year when he introduced that. So all of those things do go together. This is going to be one of those areas, especially when it deals with state and local income tax, state and local tax deductions, that is definitely going to have to be something that's going to be worked out through the
I remember the
conferences.
doctor fix in the health care bill, so I'm wondering if there's a suburban fix coming in this tax bill. But we're going to talk about it a lot tomorrow night. Mark, thank you very much. Good to have you here. Thank you. So tomorrow night, do not miss our tax reform town hall. We're going to ask these questions and more to House Speaker Paul Ryan, who will be there live, and we're going to have a live audience, and they're going to ask a lot of questions as well. It's going to be fascinating. We'll be in Northern Virginia. Brett Baer and myself, we will speak to Speaker Ryan about the path forward here, what the bill actually looks like, and what it means for you and your family. Plus, Virginia voters will take their questions, as I said, straight to the Speaker. It gets started at 6 o'clock tomorrow night, 30-minute special report, 1-hour town hall, 30-minute edition of The Story. So we're looking forward to that. Join us tomorrow night for that. Coming up next, the NFL anthem protests reversed as fans are now the ones making the political statement, turning away from football stadiums across the country in droves last night. Governor Mike Huckabee has some advice for the NFL and the dying brand straight ahead. And also tonight, a growing number of GOP leaders say that if Roy Moore wins in Alabama, they may move to banish him from the Senate. It's been hundreds of years, at least 100 years, I think. The judge is going to tell us in a moment since that has happened. Judge Andrew Napolitano coming up next with the answer when we come back with more of The Story.
I believe the women, yes.
The Republican Party and the leaders of the Republican Party are cowards.
Lawmakers calling for Moore to step aside. 29 days to go before that election, and now there's word of a plan that is being hatched on Capitol Hill to oust him if he wins the race. Ellison Barber in D.C. with the latest political fallout today. Hi, Ellison.
Hi, Martha. The calls to step down are growing, and as you said, they are quickly growing. Arizona Senator Jeff Flake just tweeted that if the choice is Roy Moore or the Democrat, he would vote for the Democrat. At least 8 Republican senators are explicitly saying Moore needs to drop out of the race.
But he should not be a United States senator.
Whatever means you would.
Whatever it requires.
For the good of yourself, your family, and your state, step aside.
Today, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called on Moore to step aside, as did Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins, Jeff Flake, Todd Young, and Chuck Grassley. Senator John McCain first called on Moore to step out of the race on Thursday. Then Senators Mike Lee, Steve Daines, and Bill Cassidy pulled their support this weekend. The NRSC chairman, Senator Cory Gardner, says Moore should not run, and if he wins, he should be expelled from the Senate. Moore is accused of making inappropriate sexual advances on at least 5 women when they were in their teens, and Moore was in his 30s. Moore denies the allegations. He says they're a political witch hunt, and now he is threatening legal action against the Washington Post, the paper that first. The Post say they spoke to over 30 people, including 4 accusers. A 5th accuser, Beverly Young Nelson, spoke out today. She says Moore sexually assaulted her when she was 15 years old. Nelson says Moore offered to drive her home from work, but instead of taking her home, the then district attorney parked his car near a dumpster and began touching her chest.
I tried fighting him off while yelling at him to stop. But instead of stopping, he began squeezing my neck, attempting to force my head onto his crotch. He said, "You're just a child." And he said, "I am the district attorney of Etowah County. And if you tell anyone about this, no one will ever believe you."
Moore has a lot of support in Alabama, but even if Republicans wanted to replace him on the ballot, they can't. The deadline already passed. Expulsion, which is what Cory Gardner suggested, is a rare move. 2/3 of the Senate would need to vote in favor of it. According to Senate records, the last time a senator was expelled, it was 1862. The Ethics Committee recommended expulsion for Senator Bob Packwood back in '95, but Packwood resigned one day after that recommendation. Martha?
Allison, thank you very much. Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Anna Napolitano. So if the people of Alabama elect him senator, can they push him out?
Well, the short answer is no. If he's elected senator, the Congress can't add to the qualifications in the Constitution, and there's only two, that he's 30 years old and that he's a resident of the state from which he's elected. So they can't add the following: you shall have behaved properly and lawfully throughout your life before you're in the Senate. So they have to seat him. Can they expel him from the Senate for something he is alleged to have done before he was in the Senate? There's no precedent for that whatsoever. In the history of the United States Congress, no one has been expelled from the House or the Senate for something they did before they were in Congress. The rules contemplate expulsion only for behavior while in Congress. So I think the Republicans will be stuck with him, and Jeff Flake may have come up with a more desirable solution. Defend the rights of women. Condemn this behavior, because the allegations appear to be more credible than the denial, and live with a Democrat.
Mitch McConnell and Steve Bannon have found something else to be at loggerheads about. Watch these two comparisons.
Do you believe these allegations to be true?
I believe the women, yes. I think he should step aside.
Why don't we get the Republican Party to back off? Okay? Where's the leadership of Mitch McConnell and where's the leadership of Paul? You know what it is? It's just like Billy Bush weekend. It's just like this thing down there with Judge Moore. It's just like on this. They're petrified of the opposition party.
So he is sending a signal to his candidate, Judge Moore. Stay the course like Donald Trump did. He overcame the Billy Bush weekend. We all remember that. It seemed like everybody was deserting him at that point. He ended up, of course, getting elected to president. Stay the course and you'll get elected. You'll be seated and they can't expel you. That's the message that's coming from Steve Bannon. So there's a lot of things at play here. There's Steve Bannon against Mitch McConnell. There's Steve Bannon against his former boss, the President of the United States. There's the fear on the part of the Republican establishment that they may lose the vote of married women, which they did lose in New Jersey and in Virginia just last week. And there's the belief that it might be better to have a Democrat in the Senate making their majority razor thin, 51 to 49, but stand up for the rights of women.
Yeah. You know, whenever there's one of these situations, it's sort of, people hearken back to other times when people have been accused of awful things.
Right.
And I thought this was interesting. Chelsea Handler tweeted this, and she was talking about Roy Moore. Imagine being molested by an older man, then that man denies ever doing it, and then goes on and gets elected to the United States Senate. What kind of message does that send to young girls everywhere? And men, to all the men who abuse women. So then Juanita Broaddrick, remember Juanita Broaddrick?
Oh, yes.
Pipes in
This is
with
an unbelievable answer.
She says, yeah, I can imagine. I was raped by the Arkansas AG, who then became the governor and president. NBC held my interview explaining the rape until after his impeachment hearing. But I'm sure you don't want to go there. Always a double standard.
Well, you know, there's a lot to be read in there. Is all of this because he's a conservative Republican? Would he be treated differently if he had been a Bill Clinton liberal Democrat? We don't know the answer to that. But the National Republican Party is in a mess right now over all this. Jeff Sessions is not going to leave. A write-in campaign is not going to work. It's beginning to look more and more like it's either going to be Judge Moore, and then he's going to fight for his seat, or it's going to be the Democrat. And then Chuck Schumer is one vote away from becoming the majority leader of the Senate. Talk about a nightmare for Donald Trump.
You never know what's coming down the pipe, right? Quick question before I let you go. Jeff Sessions, we just broke this news a few moments ago, has basically opened the door to a special counsel on Uranium One and on the Clinton investigation.
I think he needs to do that for two reasons. One, the evidence is there. And secondly, he's going to confront the House Judiciary Committee tomorrow. The Democrats are going to say, why didn't you tell everything you knew about the Russians and the campaign? The Republicans are going to say, why don't you investigate Hillary Clinton and Uranium One and pick up the ball that Jim Comey dropped on Hillary's emails? Well, he's almost done what the Republicans want tonight. So he's going to have some defenders tomorrow rather than being attacked at that committee hearing by both parties. Good move. It's a little late, but it's a good move.
Judge, thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
We'll be watching tomorrow, Judge Andrew
Absolutely.
Napolitano.
Good
Always
luck
a
with
pleasure.
that town hall. I'll
Thank
be
you.
watching
Yeah, it's going to be
that.
fun. It's going to be very interesting. All right, so coming up tonight, as the NFL remains embattled over controversial protests, the league's commissioner, Roger Goodell, reportedly making a huge request for salary and a private jet for life. According to the reports, Governor Mike Huckabee weighs in on that coming up next. So it's Monday night. Are Tunes going to fan in for the? Are they going to show up and be fans for the NFL tonight? After this scene, look at this. I mean, you have to look kind of closely, but there was a lot of empty seats out there last night. And this tweet from the Bears game that shows that image. Now, a lot of fans protesting the NFL this weekend in the wake of their NFL protests and over the Veterans Day weekend. So now there are reports, though, that given that scenario, Roger Goodell has requested almost $50 million a year in his new contract and a private jet for the rest of his life as he negotiates. Here now, Mike Huckabee, who just flew in on his private jet, former governor of Arkansas and a Fox News contributor. So is he worth that money?
You know, Martha, let me ask you something. If your ratings tanked and nobody was watching your show, fortunately they are, in great numbers. But if they weren't, do you think Fox would renew your contract and say, hey, and we're going to give you a jet to go back and forth so nobody will watch you? The NFL is a business, and when you insult your customers and those customers go elsewhere to do their shopping, well, guess what? Your revenues are down, and you don't give people raises in the midst of that.
I thought it was very interesting. There was one comment on ESPN, that people aren't talking about football anymore. They're talking about Roger Goodell. They're talking about Jerry Jones. They're talking about people not showing up. They're talking about taking a knee. Very little discussion about the game, and that's a big problem for them.
It's a huge problem. The fact is, if people wanted politics, they just watch the Oscars. They don't want politics on Sunday afternoon. They want football, and they don't want somebody to lecture them on what they should feel. This is why this is so crazy, and they've allowed these players to protest on company time wearing the costumes that are owned and paid for by the company. And look, if you want to protest, that's fine. But do it on the courthouse steps or do it on the Capitol steps, but don't do it at midfield, and certainly don't do it in a disrespect of the people in uniform or the flag.
Yeah, I did see a lot of very emotional players last night when they played the anthem, and there was a lot of military presence on that field, which was a very good thing on Veterans Day, and some of it was very well done. Switching gears in a big way, I know that you are friends with the pro-life activist Star Jones, and Star Parker, excuse me. I want to play this for you, background, but this back and forth between her and Representative Steve Cohen of Tennessee, and then I want to get your thoughts on it.
I feel it disingenuous that the issues of Medicaid would come up and other opportunities for us to readdress what has happened and broken down in our most distressed zip codes. Abortion is a leading cause of death in the black community today.
I am not disingenuous about anything I say about Medicaid or Medicare or LIHEAP or SNAP programs. And to suggest I'm disingenuous shows your ignorance or your absolute inability to deal with Congress people the way they should. I believe in those issues, and I think they're proper, and to say I'm disingenuous is just wrong, and I expect an apology.
Wow. She was very moving on this topic, Governor. Your thoughts on that exchange?
Star is a person who's had an abortion in her early life. She was on welfare. She was a high school dropout. She turned her life around. If there's anybody in this country who can speak with authority, it's Star Parker. Cohen owes her an apology. And what is most tragic in all of this is that imagine if a Republican had said to an African-American woman what he said to her, tell me, would there not be cries for him to resign?
I'm sure you're right about that. Governor, thank you very much. Always good to see you. Governor Mike Huckabee.
Thank you.
So still ahead, the emotional moment that you may have missed from the president's trip to Vietnam.
It's an honor to be here as one of 7 Vietnam veterans representing the 58,000 heroes who never made it home.